right. Hey guys, I'm Lauren. This is Nolan, and for our senior project, we're going to be doing a local anti-bullying campaign, just like raise awareness. And today we have a guest speaker for you guys, and I'm just going to let Nolan tell you a little bit more.
Hey guys, I'm Nolan. Before I tell you about our amazing guest speaker today, I wanted to kind of tell you the motivation for this project. In middle school, I was bullied to a point where eventually I had to switch schools. You know, it was a whole lot of weight on me, on my parents, you know, and I think I've changed because of it. And so the whole point of this assembly is to just spread the word, you know, raise awareness for this, because it's a very serious issue and it's very easily preventable, you know, and it's important for all of us to understand. So I'd like to welcome up Bresee. He's the co-founder of the Stop It Foundation. He's going to talk to you guys about his experience with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today. I want to illustrate what bullying can do from an experience in my backyard. As we were putting together our backyard, we planted 2 trees, as you can see. One, I hired somebody to plant that tree. And while they were planting it, I looked out the back window and I seen that person was shaking the roots. They were not careful at all, very aggressive in their efforts to plant that tree. And in my mind, I said, you know what? I'm not going to have him plant another tree for me, but I guess it's already planted now, so we'll leave it in and see what happens. I went on to decide I was going to plant the second tree myself, and a neighbor came over and helped me do that, and we dug a good hole. We put plenty of fertilizer. We were real gentle with how we placed that tree in the hole and covered it up with love. And if you can see in your mind, there's the first tree planted by the hired hand, and there's the second tree. Can any of you tell me which one of those trees was hired by the hired hand, and which of those trees was planted by me and my neighbor? In your mind, can you tell? Actually, that tree there almost died. It almost died. I actually gave it a chance. I almost probably should have pulled it out and put a new one in, but I said, you know what? I'm going to give this tree a chance, and it has fought back to life. Did you know that when you treat life with aggression, it can do permanent damage to that life, as illustrated by the 2 trees? Did you know that when you bully somebody, that you're stealing something very precious from them? Did you know that children who are bullied, they suffer a life of mental health problems thereafter? Anxiety, depression. And these are problems that do not go away when the bullying ends. They actually did a study. They wondered, you know, what happens to people that are bullied? And they found that all this research found that well into the adult life, a person will suffer from that mental health problems from being bullied as a young person. Did you know that a child that is bullied is more likely to use drugs and become a drug addict? Did you know that? So next time you're thinking about having a good time, because let's call it like a bully sees it, just having fun, right? You're just having fun. But that victim of your fun is more likely to use drugs because of your abuse. Did you know that also the bully is more likely to use drugs as well? So not only is the victim being harmed through that abuse, but also the bully is as well. He's going to be more likely to use drugs as well. Did you know that both the victim and the bully have higher incarceration rates in their adult life. So when you're bullying somebody, you're damaging their mental health, you're encouraging them to use drugs, and you're increasing the likelihood that they're going to use drugs. They're going to be incarcerated in their adult life. Did you know that 1 in 10 children drop out of school for one reason? Can anybody guess what that reason is? It's bullying, that's correct. 1 in 10 children will lose their education because they're being bullied. So as you're having a good time and you've got an easy target, someone that's easy to pick on, right? Probably the least capable of defending themselves, easy target, right? Next time you're going to pick them to pick on, it's very possible that you're going to change the very direction of their life through your actions. It's very possible that they will drop out of school. And when a person loses their education, what happens to their future? What happens to their future if you do not have an education? That victim who drops out, the probability of them living a life of poverty has just increased. And you wonder, at what expense that your bullying had on that person. You know that mental health, with a mental health damage to a child because they were a victim of bullying, often they turn to self-harm. The rates of attempted suicides go up dramatically for children who have been bullied. Extremely harmful to their well-being. Sometimes they turn to hurting others as well. A victim of bullying, they will come to school with other ideas with their damaged mental health. And sadly, children, because they are bullied, often make that decision to take their own life. The next time you're having a good time and you got an easy target, ponder that you could be taking a part of that person's life from them. You could be taking a part of their life. What the studies have found is that in over 50% of teen suicides, there is a bullying link to that end-of-life decision. 50% of children who take their own lives, it's because they were bullied. You know that humanity has had a history of brutal behavior towards one another. This goes back thousands of years. And we actually have some biblical stories that tried to bring some of the solutions to this abuse that we would have towards one another. I think about the Ten Commandments that Moses brought to us. And I think about a couple of those: to not steal, to not lie, to not murder. And in our minds, we think these are just basic principles, not to lie, not to steal, not to murder. But it hasn't always been that obvious for humanity that some of these things are wrong. To harm other people, to take their life, to place no value on another person's life, to place no value on their possessions. You just take them as your own, right? Because you're stronger and you can do it. It's kind of like bullying, isn't it? You're stronger and you can do it, so you will, right? And humanity did grow in their spirituality with those 10 Commandments, and the increase of civil rights for humanity. Each of you has a civil right to your life, to your possessions. These are God-given to you, and when somebody else takes those from you, they're no longer on moral grounds. I think of another messenger in the Bible, a great messenger. Can any of you think of who that messenger might be? His name was Jesus Christ. And he came with a message, and they believed he was going to come in fire and brimstone and free them, but that's not the kind of freedom that Christ was bringing to us. He brought the truth to us. And you ask, well, what did that truth do to the civil rights movement of his time and thereafter? And you look at the Roman Empire. They became Christian with time. And before Christianity took root in the Roman Empire, people were being fed to lions. They had placed no value on life. People were being placed in a cage with other gladiators to the death. They placed no value on life. People were bought and sold with no second thought. Women's right to their chastity was not a right given them in the Roman Empire. But guess what? As time came along, and as time grew, Christianity changed the brutality found in the Roman Empire. You know, the gladiator games disappeared, didn't they? People being fed to lions disappeared, didn't they? It has changed our society even to this day, that message. But there was still more work to be done in our time. Sadly, it wasn't that long ago, when you look at all of history, that we had not completely let go of this abuse of others and using your strength to dominate and control them and abuse them. And there was a great messenger that came along, Martin Luther King. There was a civil rights problem, the strong abusing the weak. And with the effort of that civil rights movement, hopefully we've been able to let go of some of the hate and abuse of each other. I also think about the suffrage movement giving women rights as well. Did you know it wasn't that long ago, if you were a woman, you're going to be a piece of property, right? To either your father or your husband, property. The rights of the strong, the weak are being taken by the strong. You know that this bullying awareness issue is part of the civil rights movement, where the strong abuse the weak. And I'm going to ask you today to make your choice. Which side of this movement are you going to be on? Are you going to stand up for the bullies? And you might think, well, why would anybody do that? There actually are adults that do stand up for bullies. They don't want to address it because they're too lazy, right? They don't want it reported because it might increase liability. All kinds of reasons. And as a person, you might be afraid to say anything. I know that those who marched with Martin Luther King were afraid as well. I know those who supported Jesus Christ were afraid as well. Many of them were harmed. Doing the right thing to protect the civil rights of people comes with needs a little bit of courage. There's a little fear that comes with that. Today, I'm inviting you to become a part of this civil rights movement to protect your peers, and as adults, some of you are approaching, children, from being abused, from having their mental health damaged. It's a civil right. To be able to attend school and get an education without being abused, that's a civil right. And to your very life being taken because your mind has been so scrambled by abuse, that is a civil right. So what can you do to join this at your age? I mean, you can't go and vote or anything, so what can you do? Have any of you heard of the term upstander? Is this a term you're familiar with? You know, one of the things you can do, if you see somebody being bullied, at the very least, don't laugh, right? How many of you have laughed when you see another person being harmed, an easy target being harmed? You could, if you got a little more courage, you could maybe say something. Hey, this ain't cool. It's not good. You can mention it to a teacher. I know there's the fear of snitches get stitches. Who's heard that term? You have. Yeah, I see a whole bunch of hands out there. Snitches get stitches. And you know what? That's a very real fear, isn't it? It is. It is. But today, what side of this equation are you going to be on? And I'm going to tell you, if you're being bullied, I want you to get some help. I want you to go to your teacher, your parent, your counselor, your pastor, and I want you to keep telling somebody till somebody will finally listen. Is it possible the first person you tell is going to, oh, shoo, get out of here, I don't have time for you? Is that possible? Or that you just need to toughen up, right? Is that another saying that lazy adults will say? You know, I've heard that saying so many times from adults. They just need to toughen up, right? It's probably about 50% of the adults on this very issue of bullying, that is their viewpoint, their opinion. And just the other day, I was talking to a guy on the internet, and he actually brought that exact point up to me. I've heard it hundreds of times, and he said they just need to toughen up. When I put my kid in MMA and on and on and on, how tough he was and how tough his family was. And so I brought back a question to him to explore his belief. And what I told him was actually a very real story. The very real story that got me started on this very effort. It was a friend of mine, and he came to me, and he said, Brian, he said, my daughter's getting bullied. And it's by a young man, and he's twice her size. He's way more mean. It's just a real sweet, gentle girl. And every day he's following her around, and it's always something new. One day telling her, you know what? I can't even hardly, we're in a church, I don't want to even, you're full of something because your eyes are brown. That's one day. The next day, this bully's asking her if she thought about what it would be like to be raped. And the next day is something new, something new, something new. And it started to tear her mental health to pieces. So this defender of bullying, they just need to toughen up. I went to him and I said, look, let me apply this story to your family. What would you do if your wife had a man twice her size saying these exact things to her? Would you instruct her to just toughen up? What would be your instructions to your wife? And I think he got the point after that. He realized that, you know what, at times toughening up is a part of the solution, but when adults leave it as the only solution, it's very dangerous to the mental health of children and at times even to a whole school when a child has been bullied to the point where they're violent. You know, this issue has hit so close to home for me. You might ask, what is Mr. Bresee, Brian, doing here? What got him started on this effort? And we had a tragedy in our family. I got a call on the phone from my wife. I was at work, and it couldn't be any worse of a call that a father could get. That day, my son died, Samuel. He died at his own hand. And people say that I can't even imagine how hard that would be. And you know what? They're right. So much worse than you could ever imagine. But that tragedy sent me on a journey of exploration. I wanted to know why. Why did he make that decision? I didn't know. And I started doing the research. And let me tell you, that's a painful journey to begin. And we finally got the suicide note, and I started reading chat logs on the internet, and what I came to find out is that he was being bullied. We had just moved into a new neighborhood, and there was a couple of kids down the street playing street hockey. And I said, Samuel, why don't you go down and make some new friends? So we did. Went down and made some new friends. And when it was over, it was time to go to Scouts. And do any of you have any idea where this Scouts might have been taking place? The place that's supposed to be a sanctuary for children, for everyone. It was at the church. He brought these two neighbors to the church, of all places. You think it won't happen at church? This is wrong. And when they got there, he started getting mocked immediately, him and his guests. It was the first time his guests had ever been there. Immediately, all three were mocked. And my son came home to me and he said, Dad, as soon as we arrived to Scouts at the church, the new friend, the new guest that he brought with him became extremely terrified. And he didn't know why. He said, Dad, I don't know why. And anyways, sadly, I didn't learn why until it was too late. What we come to find out is that this guest of his was being severely bullied. He was being called harsh names. And he was harmed by the bullies. I call him the first victim. And because my son had brought this young man to, of all places, the church, guess who became the next victim of these bullies? That's right, it was my son. And some of the things he was being called, he was so embarrassed by that he was too afraid to tell us, although we did ask. It's a lot of embarrassment. Often victims are too embarrassed to ask for help because you're not tough enough, right? Not toughening up like some adults tell you to. Especially when you're 14, you're trying to prove you are tough, right? So sadly, we found out too late. You know, the message of Jesus Christ was to love one another. Truthfully, if you see somebody being abused and you laugh, is that loving them? You see somebody being harmed, having their education taken from them, or their mental health or their well-being. Today, I'm hoping that you'll become a part of the solution and become a part of this civil rights movement and begin to protect your peers and others from this abuse. I thank you for having me here today. Thanks.